Alright, real quick, time for a MooffGames slash FourFats games tier list video. Down at the bottom, there are 12 games here. If the game's not out yet, it's not on the tier list. And if it's a game that I have not played and cannot play because it's not available anymore, then it's not on the tier list. If I played it when it was available, then it's here. So, starting off with Toon Shooters 1, let's see. I'm going to stick it in B tier. I quite like Toon Shooters 1. I don't have a lot to say about it because it's an incredibly simple game, but it has its own vibe. So yeah, Toon Shooters 1. It's okay, these first 6-ish games are the ones I don't have to say about. These more over here. I'm going to move Superboys down here as well as Dungeon Time and then talk about them in that order. These, towards the end, are the ones I have a lot to say about. These, towards the beginning, I don't really. Toon Shooters 1. It's a space shooter. That's kind of it. Toon Shooters, I think the more interesting thing here is determining which of the Toon Shooters games are better. Because Toon Shooters 2 is the only FourFats sequel, as of now, that isn't drastically different in terms of quality. These two games are pretty much in the same tier. I don't really care that much which one goes on top here. One could go above the other, doesn't really matter. But trying to figure out which one, by logic, I think I'm going to give it to Toon Shooters 2. Simply because Toon Shooters 2 to date is the most accessible FourFats game, period. It's available on iOS, it's available on Android, it's available on a web browser. It is the only FourFats web browser game I could get working for this video. It is available on Steam, it is available on Switch, it is available on the Amazon App Store. It is the singular FourFats game that is the most accessible, and unlike the original, it has controller support, it has keyboard support, it has mouse support, touchscreen support, depending on what version you're playing, it can have any or all of those things. So, yeah, it is the singular most accessible FourFats game. In terms of core gameplay, it's not really a drastic improvement over the original, and there are some things the original has that Toon Shooters 2 doesn't, like endless mode, local co-op, the 360 characters. Versus Toon Shooters 2, really the only thing it has over the original is online multiplayer, which is a big deal. That is a big thing. But again, I think just how accessible Toon Shooters 2 is makes it better than the original by default. Because again, these games are like the exact same quality-wise, at least in my opinion. Artistically, I honestly don't know which I prefer either. So yeah, I think Toon Shooters 2 has to take it just because it is available on the most platforms of any FourFats game, and Toon Shooters 1 is available on nothing now since the iOS version got taken down. Moving on to Maximus 1, solid A tier. Maximus 1 is, of the medieval beat-em-up style games they've put out, is probably the most simple one, which isn't a bad thing. I think it's kind of a strength of Maximus 1 to be very drastically different from Maximus 2. Maximus 2 does not feel like a straight-up upgrade over Maximus 1 for this reason. They're drastically different games in terms of how they play, which, again, I think is a strength for Maximus 1. If this just played like a worse version of Maximus 2, it would probably rank lower in the tier list, all things considered. But the fact that Maximus 2 is a drastically different experience, I think, is a good thing for Maximus 1's sake on this tier list. Judging it independently of the sequel, I think it's the best FourFats game up until this point in the timeline. Toon Shooters 2, I've decided to rank that early on because, again, it's basically the same experience as the first game. I'm ranking all the other FourFats games at the end and all the other movement games at the beginning. But, yeah, I think Maximus 1 is very solid overall. There's a lot of weird things with it, like the gambling system. But, yeah, I think Maximus 1's pretty solid overall, but it's painfully simple. There's not a lot. Other than the weird stuff like the slot machine, the core gameplay of Maximus 1 isn't really that interesting. The only thing I think it does better than Maximus 2 is the mount system, and I guess the fact that it has a black book. But yeah, I think the mount system in Maximus 1 is handled better. You can't dismount mounts, but mounts are a way more positive impact on the player's moveset than they are in Maximus 2. So I think overall, I think that's really the only thing Maximus 1 does better than Maximus 2. Now we got the 3 bear games, and I think the first one is bearable. which I'm going to put most of the bear games like here. I don't have a lot to say about them, really. I'm going to put Bear-a-Lot there also. I'm going to put Bear-a-Lot of, which do I put above? Because, like, Bearable, like, has a way worse story mode than Bear-a-Lot does, but Bear-a-Lot is just the standard match 3 gameplay, which is done to death at this point. So, I don't know which of these ranks above the other. Paradise 2, though, I know for a fact is the best of the 3 gameplay-wise, and it's not even close. It's the only one that doesn't have a story mode of the 3. I have not played Paradise 1, so I do not know how much of a gameplay improvement Paradise 2 is, but, yeah, I do know it's better than these other 2. I don't have a lot to say about the Bear games, as I have barely played them. That was not an intentional pun, but whatever. I have barely played either of the Bear games, and of them, Paradise 2 is really the only one that I like gameplay-wise. I don't think either of these are bad games, hence why they're not in D tier. I just got nothing out of the experience. I actually had a little bit of fun with Paradise 2, hence why it's in B tier. Alright, Blackmore 1. This is the one that I think people are going to hate my opinion of, because, like, I don't like Blackmore 1 very much. Blackmore 1 has an absolutely horrible sense of weight to it. Like, every character moves way too fast. Every character feels like they're made out of paper and just get rocketed to the sun at the slightest tap. Like, the game has no sense of weight to it whatsoever. Everything moves way too fast, which is... And the controls are just significantly worse than all of the other... 2D platformer games the FourFats would put out later. The only thing I can say about Blackmore 1 that I like is, I think aesthetically and tone-wise, it's my favorite of the Blackmore games. And the fact that it exists means that Blackmore 2 happened, which is cool, I guess, but I don't really get anything out of playing Blackmore 1, like, at all. It doesn't feel satisfying to me, so, yeah, C tier. Superboys... Okay, on one hand, Superboys is a massive gameplay improvement over Blackmore 1. I think it has a way better sense of weight to it than Blackmore 1 does. The controls themselves, like the buttons on screen, are the exact same, but the game has a way better sense of weight to it than Blackmore 1 does. And the sprites are better, the character movesets, because of how many of them have more variety than they did in Blackmore 1. I think the whole, like, type system is cool, and I think the way the story mode, like, forces you to use different characters is neat also. Really, my only problem with Superboys is that I think the game could have used more customization stuff, custom stages in story mode, because you have, I think, 3 unique bosses in story mode, I think. Wormulon, Eyeboy, and Carnivore. And they're in random places in story mode. The rest of the stages in story mode are just kind of sort of either buffed regular characters and always on, regular PvP stages. So I think that could have helped Superboys. Also, I'm not a fan of the draft system, like, at all. I think it's terrible. Plus, it to date has the only singular character that costs money in FourFats games. Blackmore 2 is kind of weird in that regard, but it has the only singular character that you have to buy with money. So, I don't think it's as good as Maximus 1 for that reason. But, I don't think it's bad either. I think it's a massive improvement over Blackmore 1, but I don't think it's better than Maximus 1 because of all of the weird monetization stuff going on. And inherently, I think it has the most repetitive story mode of the bunch, even though I think the core gameplay is a massive improvement over the previous 2D platformer they did. And also, as a platform fighter, it's not the greatest thing in the world in comparison to other platform fighters. So yeah, I feel like this is an okay spot for it. Either top of B or bottom of A. I think that's fair. Alright, Dungeon Time Turbo. Yeah. I have never played the paid version of Dungeon Time. To my knowledge, the only major gameplay addition it has is multiplayer, which, that's a very, very good gameplay addition, but it's kind of sort of something Dungeon Time should have launched with to begin with, because, it's a friggin' dungeon crawler. That's kind of a very, very important aspect of the genre. Which, the main reason why Dungeon Time is in D tier is that it is a dungeon crawler that sucks at being a dungeon crawler. There's no loot system at all. Enemies drop gold, I think, but you can't buy anything with it. There's a very simple level up system. There's no equipment system at all. There's nothing like that. So it's a dungeon crawler that omits the dopamine power up thing that dungeon crawlers have. The version that's on this tier list doesn't have multiplayer, which I think out of all of the medieval style FourFats games, Dungeon Time would benefit from multiplayer the most, and it sucks that the free version doesn't have it. That is also not something that you should pay for, considering every other FourFats game with multiplayer comes with it out the gate. So, yeah, even if this was the paid version, it would probably rank one spot above the free version. So, The only cool thing I can say about Dungeon Time is that, from a technological perspective, it is probably the biggest leap the FourFats made. It has randomly generated levels. No other FourFats game has that. And it is the first FourFats game to completely be made out of 3D models. So that's cool, I guess. But, again, I don't really think that makes up for it being easily the worst game here. Plus, at least with the free version, on the second to last level, because it's randomly generated, you can get soft locked. I remember, I think I tested this. I played through the final level in Dungeon Time 5 times in a row just to see, and I think one of those 5 times I was able to beat the level. The other 4 times the level glitched out. I went through the floor, health bar disappeared, just couldn't do anything, couldn't even pause the game, had to close the game manually, so that's fun. So yeah, D tier. It's a game that, there is a random chance, and it's a very high chance, that the game will not be beatable, and you'll have to reset it to keep playing. So yeah, D tier by default. Alright, Smash Club Streets of Shminis, which is... I mean, it's a very memorable name, but I think it's... but I think it's a terrible name. Let's see. I'm going to put it here. I accidentally closed that. No, I didn't. There we go. I'm going to put it there. I think it's a more well-made game than Blackmore 1, but I get far less enjoyment out of it. Pretty much just like these other two games here. I get no enjoyment out of Smash Club at all. I think it's a bog standard experience. I think it's a more competently made game than Blackmore 1, which is why I'm ranking it above Blackmore 1. Even though I get way more enjoyment out of Blackmore 1. Ranking this below Blackmore 1 just feels incorrect. It just feels incorrect. Frickin', I'm going to rank it above these 2 games also, because it tries. It at the very least tries, and it's competently made. I just don't think it's a very interesting experience. Alright, now we're getting on to these 2 down here. As of now, 2 most recent FourFats games, and Blackmore 2 immediately goes in S tier. I have a lot of weird issues with Blackmore 2. A lot of issues most people probably don't have with the game. But the reason for this is simply because it is the FourFats game that I've put the most time into. I am incredibly familiar with Blackmore 2, and I am incredibly familiar with every single problem that it has. So, I am far less familiar with a lot of these games down here. I think the only other FourFats game I've put a comparable amount of time into is probably the 2 Maximus games. And even then, and maybe Toon Shooters 2, and even then, I think Blackmore 2 takes the cake. Blackmore 2 has a way better sense of weight to it than Blackmore 1 does. It has controller support. It has the PvP mode, which I'm actually a fan of the PvP mode. I know most people don't like it, but I like Blackmore 2 PvP for the most part. It has probably the best optional campaign of any of these games. It has the hero roster, I think, overall is fantastic, way better than the previous games. It has a way better sense of weight to it than I think any game up until this point does. So I think Blackmore 2 has earned its spot in S tier. That being said, I think Maximus 2 is the best FourFats game as of now. Now, I am less familiar with Maximus 2 than Blackmore 2. I probably only have a double-digit amount of hours into Maximus 2 versus a triple-digit in Blackmore 2, so, yeah. But even then, I think Maximus 2 is a way better game than Blackmore 2. Game looks better, way better. In terms of the visual style, it's way more consistent than Blackmore 2 is. In terms of, like, fairness, I think it's a more fair experience than Blackmore 2. In terms of the RPG mechanics, I think it handles them better than Blackmore 2. In terms of everything, basically, I think it's a better experience than Blackmore 2. The only thing I think Blackmore 2 does better is that the weight of Blackmore 2 is slightly better. I think Blackmore 2 is a slightly better weight to it. So hitting enemies in Blackmore 2 feels slightly more satisfying. That being said, it's significantly easier to hit enemies and maintain combos and all of that stuff in Maximus 2. Significantly easier. So combat overall in Maximus 2 is way more satisfying, as well as it's really just combat because it's a beat 'em up, which is the main thing. I think Blackmore 2 overall is just a more satisfying experience than Blackmore 2 is. Maximus 2 just kind of takes the cake. Now, Punch TV is, in development right now, and I've heard people say that it's going to come out in May. I don't know how true that is. We shall see. But as of now, this is the tier list. Let's give it a final glance over to make sure that I don't want to move anything around. No, this feels correct. Actually, that feels more correct. That feels a little more correct. Actually, there we go. There we go. The more I thought about it, the more I took issue with the stuff in Superboys. But yeah, I think this looks correct. Okay, now it looks correct. Yeah, that feels correct at this point. The only thing I'm thinking about doing is moving Blackmore 1 down to D tier. I'm thinking on if I want to do that or not, and I'm leaning towards no, because there are points in time where I can get enjoyment out of Blackmore 1. I can never get enjoyment out of Dungeon Time, so I think there needs to be a clear line between those two games. So, yeah, people are going to absolutely hate this video. I can already tell. People are going to absolutely despise this video, and I am okay with that.